Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining us today for the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm excited to be joined by my friend Josh Cook. He's a cybersecurity and privacy attorney, and we're going to talk today about some things that everybody, business owners and individuals, can look out for when it comes to privacy and cybersecurity, some of the trends that he might be seeing, and maybe a little bit about what we should do if we are the target of a scam or a hack, because I know from personal experience and from what I've heard from clients, when you get an email or a phone call or a threat, it's terrifying. And so, our brains are certainly wired to look out for danger. And now it used to be threats on the on the street or out in the wilderness, but right now it's in our phones. It's buzzing. It is alerting us every time we check our email. We are scanning for danger. And so sometimes it can be very, very scary, even if it's not always going to look like a very clear spam email. I know when I first left corporate and joined a smaller firm, I got an email it looked like it was coming from my new boss. And it said to go pick up some presents, some gift cards for the team, and asked if I would go do it while I was out. And I'd worked in compliance, luckily, for so long that I was like, this is weird. But it did look like a real email. I was the newest person added to the website for the firm with my email, and I was probably a super easy target. So I called my boss, and he was like, no, that's not me. But if I was better behaved, I probably would have just gone and bought it and said, okay, let's figure this out. So I think that it's just more sophisticated. So I really wanted to talk to Josh today to figure out what we can actually do, because sometimes it seems a bit overwhelming or kind of like, just a lost cause. So thank you, Josh, so much for joining me today.
Sure. No, I'm happy to be here and always happy and excited to talk about privacy and cybersecurity. It's a fascinating area because it touches all of us. And, no matter what we do, the bad guys are always changing. They're always changing their tactics. They're always changing up what they do. And so, the key is to just be vigilant and kind of, use your spidey senses like you did, right, with the story you just told. When something doesn't seem 100% right, slow it down, think about it, try to make sure that the email's coming from the actual person you think it's coming from. Try to see if, you can kind of hover your cursor over the email address and see if, or the name of the sender, and see if the email address matches the name, right? So things like that. So I get, and we all get all the time, emails that are they're phishing emails, and the easiest thing to do is just check the sender, right? And if the sender doesn't match, the name and the email address don't match, just throw it into your spam folder and move on with your day. Don't even think about it anymore. But that's kind of, phishing is so ubiquitous because it works,
Mm-hmm.
and it's very, very cheap, right? The
Yeah.
bad guys can put together a phishing email for pennies and send it out to 1 million people. And if, a 0.5% click on the link, that's a lot of people, right?
Right. And so I noticed that, and I have workplaces where sometimes you'll get an email from the CEO, and you're like, why are they asking me to pull this report? But it might be, they're asking me to pull this report. And it feels like this is priority number one right now. And so I think that's the part that's really hard,
Yeah.
is even very smart people can fall victim to these, because it looks super, super real. So I think that's so
Yeah.
smart to kind of hover over the sender, to actually maybe pause and be like, why are they asking me to do this? If this is a part of your normal job, even if it is and it looks a little bit different, that's definitely one of the things. And I think all of us, if you've ever worked in corporate where you click on something and it says surprise compliance, is you just fell for something, those are terrible, but I do think they kind of teach you a bit of a lesson.
Well, yeah, I mean, they are, those are designed to teach, to help you figure out, how to spot the fraudulent emails. But, the funny thing is that no matter how many times in a corporate environment, no matter how many times they send out trainings like that, there is never 100% success rate. Like absolutely never. There's always someone that clicks it. And frankly, it could be someone who works in IT security, right? Because it doesn't matter, right? It doesn't matter what you do for a living. It doesn't matter how many times you've seen these things. Phishing emails work, and that's why they're used. And they, I've fallen for them. You've fallen for them. Everybody in the world has fallen for them.
Yeah.
And that's the big thing that I always like to tell people is don't feel bad that you fell for it. Just learn from it and try not to fall for it again, right? Because
Yeah.
it's it is they are carefully crafted to create this sense of urgency, right? And CEO fraud is absolutely endemic in the business world, right? So that idea that well, I just got this email from the CEO or from the CFO or whoever it is, slow it down. And that's really the big key piece of advice I can give is don't fall for that urgency, slow it down, and let your logical brain take over for a minute and say, geez, does this make sense, right? And what else can I do to verify this? Because, it's really not an emergency that I can't just make a phone call or think about it a little bit before I respond to it.
Yeah. Yeah. No, and I think that's definitely, when you kind of put yourself in the shoes of the people that may be scamming, like that urgency, that necessity, that fear is absolutely on their side, not ours. So while we're still talking about individuals, what are some things that individuals can do? I know holiday shopping, see, people are going to be online, they are going to be using their credit cards, using their debit cards. What are some things that people can do to better protect their information, which is bound to be shared
Yeah.
just because of the way the world is? But what are some of the things that we could do on the individual side before we talk to about the enterprise and the business end?
Sure. So you're absolutely right. We're moving into the holiday season. People are using their credit cards. They're shopping online. And frankly, even if you're not shopping online, going to a physical store is not that much different from shopping online. Frankly, the store is transmitting your credit card over the internet to its servers, so it's really not different from just sitting at your computer and shopping. But one of the things that folks can do and need to do is first and foremost look at your account statements, like see if there are any fraudulent transactions, anything you don't recognize. That's happened to me multiple times, and it pays to just look at your statements. Um, Another thing that you can do is a lot of credit card companies will offer to send you a text message or an email for every charge, or you can set the criteria for any charge over a certain dollar threshold or any charge at a certain type of vendor. So if my credit card is ever used at a gas station, I'll get an alert. Or if it's not used at a gas station, right? I only use one particular credit card to buy gas. If it's ever used outside of those parameters, I get an alert. Those can be key to finding fraud too. Your credit card issuers want to help. They use artificial intelligence. They use all sorts of different tools to try to identify transactions that don't fit what they think the pattern of transactions for you should be. But there's limits to what the card issuer can do. You, as the owner of that account, have ultimate responsibility to make sure that you're protected, and you are in the best position to make sure that or to verify whether a particular transaction is legitimate or not. So bottom line, look at your statements, set up those alerts if you can. That's all going to be very helpful. um, one other thing that I want to mention as we again move into the holiday season, there's an awful lot of charity fraud out
Mhm.
there, and that's something that that we really need to pay close attention to. There are ways to confirm that a charity is what it is and is what it says it is. Use those means. Again, you don't have to fall for the sense of urgency. It doesn't have to be a send money here now because we critically need this donation. Slow it down. Any charity that is in critical need, you're going to be able to find out through alternative means what that need is and what they're actually doing with the money and whether they're a legit charity to begin with, because there's an awful lot of not so legitimate charities out there as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that's really important. I know we've all probably seen, commercials. We've gotten like there's a lot of need in the world. I think there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of charities, there's a lot of organizations that are doing amazing things to support people in our country and other countries. But you're right, you can find them on your own. Like you can go find St. Jude, you can go find other and look them up and make your I think it's the reactive part rather than being proactive that's super important, because I have a lot of clients that are very they are gifting, they are making these donations to the charities they support, but they're almost like in control of it. Like we talk about it ahead of time, like who do you want to support, what organizations do you care about, so it's not that responding, because some of the emotional pull it's very strong. And that's one of the lovely things about humans and some people who are so kind and so nice and generous and want to help everybody. But yeah, I think it's really important to be the one in control of that. You can still do it, it's just a matter of like doing your homework, figuring, instead of just click here, donate now.
Right.
That
And
easy
and
part.
and you're not a bad person if you take that extra couple of minutes to figure out, right? You're not a bad person if you slow it down and confirm that this is a legit charity. That
Yeah.
doesn't make you bad at all.
No, it really doesn't. And going back to what you said before, open your damn statements. Look, I know that some people, I talk to them, I know them, I was them, where you don't want to look at that statement until maybe January, maybe February. Please look at them, because some things will stand out. And like you mentioned something, and I want to talk about with regarding credit card fraud. Sometimes when there's a fraudulent charge, it might not mean that they've stolen your identity. Can you talk a little bit more about those charges and how some credit card issuers and companies are being attacked, and how we can kind of figure that out quickly if we're looking for certain things that stand out on our statements?
Yeah, and this is something that has touched me personally, right? I've dealt with this in my own life with credit cards, and basically we've gotten to the state of technology here where a computer can guess a numeric string pretty easily, right? And so that's all a credit card is. It's just a numeric string. It's 16 digits. The first 4 digits actually relate to the type of card and the bank that issues the credit card. So those first 4 digits don't really change very much. They change from bank to bank, but if you're targeting as a bad guy, if you're targeting a particular bank, those first 4 digits don't change. So then you're dealing with a 16-digit account number for the credit card. And then you have to guess the 3-digit CVV number and the month and year of the expiration date. So that's a very limited number of numbers that the bad guys have to guess. And using today's computing power, it actually takes seconds to run through countless permutations of numbers to get to something that works. And so, just because you've had a fraudulent charge on your credit card does not mean that someone has actually stolen your identity. A lot of times it just means that they've guessed the right string of numbers so that they can run your credit card. That's it. So, what I had to deal with was I saw fraudulent charges. I called the credit card company. They canceled the card, reissued it, canceled that charge. And like a month later, I had another fraudulent charge for the exact same card, right? But it had a different credit card number. So I was worried that someone was actually targeting me, and the bank confirmed, no, they're not targeting you, they're targeting us, right? This is something that the issuing bank was dealing with, and they were dealing with it on a large scale. There's a bad actor that was just, figured out the first 4 digits of their credit card number, and so they were just using that as a starting point and guessing the rest. And it doesn't take very much with today's computing power to guess the right string. So that happens, and really the only way you can catch it is by looking at your statements. And the banks are going to try to help you out. They're going to use their tools to try to figure out what's fraudulent, what's not. But a lot of times that first step is the account holder saying, wait, something's wrong here.
Mhm.
And without raising your hand and pointing that out, the bank is not going to take a whole lot of action. And there may very well be a time limit on your credit card agreement for, how much time can go by between the fraudulent charge and you complaining about it,
Yeah.
right? So if you're not opening your account statement, that time is going to pass. And, after 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is for that issuing bank, you're going to have basically sat on your rights too long, and now you can't complain about it.
Yeah. No, and I think that that's so important. I know that it can be stressful, but this is like, you made a decision every time, you spend money, and, looking at those statements is important because we don't want them to get our money. And then, I think that a lot of the companies, and we could talk about businesses later, one of the best things that they have, the most valuable things, is our trust. And so if they are willing to work with you, if they are willing to correct things very quickly, we have to do our part and help out, kind of identify it, because I have seen a lot of credit card companies immediately go to work to protect their clients, and as well as they can. But before we move on to businesses, what are the things individuals can do? I know passwords, having like a crazy password that you'll never remember on your own is important. Not your birthday, not that. But what are some things that you think that individuals could do as much, and then also we'll talk about businesses after, but what are the things that we can all do besides looking at our statements to protect ourselves as best as we can?
Yeah, no, and it's a great point. There are studies out there that I read kind of annually, and one of them shows the most common passwords, right? And of course, password is one of the most common passwords, right? Password 123 4, right? Those are the most common passwords that are used by people because, by human nature, we're all kind of lazy. We want to use as little effort for as much result as possible. And if you have, I think the average person has something like 35 or 38 different accounts online. So you've got all those different accounts. You don't want to have to remember 35 different passwords. So you use the same passwords. And that is a terrible, terrible practice, because when the bad guys are attacking, TJ Maxx, for example, or they're attacking LinkedIn or Facebook, they're not looking for your account there. They're looking for your credentials there because they know you're reusing them for your bank account or your investment account. And that's the real target there. That's what they're looking for. So you have to not reuse passwords. And that is the number one risk right now for individuals, is reusing passwords. So how do you get away from that? You can use a password manager. And there are some that are built into your web browser on your laptop. There are some that there are apps that you can download that will manage your passwords for you. And they will create super complicated passwords every time you open a new account. So those are really critical to use. They're a great thing to have and a great thing to use. More than that, though, you should be enabling multi-factor authentication on every account. That MFA, the multi-factor authentication, it's an extra step, and it can be a pain in the butt, but it is also critical to protecting your account, because what MFA really does is it ensures that the person who's accessing your account doesn't just know your username and password. They have something else, right? They have your phone number, they have your cell phone, they have your email, right? So if they have access to all that, they're probably you, right? Not some fraudster out there who's trying to impersonate you just because they know your login credentials for a particular site. So that MFA can be really critical in stopping a lot of attacks against individuals. And then the last thing I'll mention here is one particular component of MFA can be an authenticator. So like an authenticator app, which will give you a 6 or 8 digit token that changes every minute. And then you have to plug that into the website. And that proves that you are who you are, right? It proves that you're holding your cell phone in your hand, that it's you. You had to authenticate into your cell phone. But that's just kind of a part of multi-factor authentication. We're kind of moving in the next few years, you can see it happening now in some cases, but in the next few years, we'll probably move completely away from passwords altogether, which is, I think, great because they're hard to remember. But if you can use things like biometrics, your facial recognition to unlock your phone, a PIN to unlock your phone, those kinds of things are pass keys, and those pass keys use a different level of encryption, and they basically ensure that by entering the pass key, I know that I am who I am. The only way to get into my phone is by entering that 4-digit code. And so whoever's entering that 4-digit code, that must be me, right? Because it requires you to physically hold your phone in your hand. And facial recognition is the same, right? It's recognizing that the person who says that they are, the person who says they're Josh Cook, well, that looks like Josh Cook, and that's a live picture of Josh Cook right in front of the phone. It's got to be him. So those are critical features moving forward. And unfortunately, there's a lot of companies that will give you the option right now to enable those. You should absolutely enable those because those are security features, and they are next generation security features that are going to help protect you that much better. There's a lot of companies that they are hesitant to require them because they are a source of friction, or the companies see them as a source of friction for their users. And I think it's unfortunate that a lot of companies think that way, because I, for one, want that security. If I'm accessing my bank account, I want to be confident that I'm the only one who can access it. And so I like that my bank requires me to take some extra steps because it's my bank account and it's important, and I want to make sure that nobody else has access to it.
Yeah, and I think that's very smart. Everybody, if you don't have that on there or you've declined it because of the friction, to think about it as far as even, and I've seen this, with people like you mentioned LinkedIn before, their social media gets hacked, and you think like maybe you're not maybe you're not in it much, and you're like, oh, that's annoying. I've got to figure out. Some people, it's absolutely critical to their business, and it's terribly disruptive, but they're not trying necessarily to get your social media. They're not trying to get your LinkedIn. You're right. They're trying to get your username, your password, your data. And so I think it's just, I've gotten pretty used to it. It's a small step, but the information that I'm dealing with is pretty sensitive. Like, I just would not want to risk it. But I think it's just another thing. But again, it's very helpful and support. And I mean, I think that they're all of the people that are working to try to get your information are working very hard. We have to work a little harder than nothing to protect it. And I know like the biometrics is definitely useful, the fingerprints, the facial recognition. I don't know if any of you have small children that have tried to grab your thumb and put it on your phone to unlock it, or wave it in front of your face so they could get access to it. These they're smart. These people trying to get into your phones, they're very smart. We've got to outsmart.
Yes.
So
they absolutely are smart.
they are smart, and they are working hard. They're working overtime to get more screen time. So I do want to talk, because yes, those are all amazing things that we can do, but all of us maybe have gotten notified that our data has been compromised in a breach, where we maybe it's our healthcare provider, maybe it's somebody that we have no real, we do business with them no matter what. So when you work with corporations, business owners who really deal in trust and keeping care of their clients, this is a very difficult thing to have to tell your clients that something has happened. What are some of the things that you are seeing on that end as far as information and data breaches, and also what should those business owners be doing to make sure that they have the highest levels of security on the information that they're using?
Yeah, I mean, it's an excellent question because every business is going to be unique, right? And so the data that you have control over is different from the data that other businesses have, and your size is going to dictate a lot of how you handle things, right? There are certain minimum requirements that you're just going to have to comply with, no matter how big you are, how small you are. But there's a reasonableness component to how you operate that is really based on how big you are, how many customers you have, what sort of data you're dealing with. And so that has to be scaled appropriately to the company. First and foremost, though, Misty, you're absolutely right. Trust is the cornerstone of any customer business relationship. And that's I've for throughout my career, even before I started getting into privacy and cybersecurity, that was the focus of my legal practice, was that customer business relationship and how critical trust is to that. So when there is an incident, uh, it's basically incumbent on the business to be open and honest with its impacted customers and explain to them what happened, why, what the customers can do to help themselves, and what the business is going to do to help the customers. And it's not always easy to know the answers to all those questions right out of the gate. So if it has to be an ongoing dialogue, so be it, right? If the business needs to say, we don't know all the answers to these things, but we are promising you we're going to find out, and we're going to take ownership of this problem, and we're going to drive it to completion. That's what a business needs to do. And I can't say enough how critical it is to be honest with the customers about what has happened. And, sometimes that does mean saying, we could have done better here, and we are going to do better going forward, right? We've learned from this. We've instituted some improvements, and we're going to make this right for you as a customer. We're going to make it better. What I've found is that the companies that are honest about what happened, they end up being more resilient with their customer base than the companies that try to shade it a little bit or try to, they're maybe not so forthcoming about what happened. Those customers are, or those companies are putting their long-term goals behind their short-term goals, right? They want to avoid the big short-term problem of customer anxiety and maybe a regulatory problem. They want to kind of shortcut that part of it at the expense of the long-term resilience issue. And that's really, when you're talking about cybersecurity or privacy, resilience is the goal for the company. And the only way you can be resilient is if you put in the effort going in, before there's an incident, you've prepared for it. And then once you have an incident, how you handle it means so much more than the fact that the incident happened. Every business will suffer a cyber breach or a privacy breach. Every business. It is not a question of if, it's when. So knowing that it's going to happen to you, it really puts the onus on you to understand that it's how you handle the incident that really dictates whether customers are going to trust you in the future.
So knowing that, like if you're thinking that this is going to happen at some point, most likely, how can we plan for it? How can we plan ahead? What kind of procedures should we have in place? What kind of, secure, like what kind of process should we have if we have any access to sensitive information? What are some of the things that we can do if we kind of switch that to being like, oh my God, I hope it doesn't happen to me, okay, this will probably happen. It's just when, or hopefully it won't. What should we kind of prepare for? I know that, I try to think about, okay, like updating my tech, updating things like regularly, making sure that I don't slack off there. But what are you seeing as things that we can do to kind of make it harder to become a victim? And then also, have things in place so we don't panic and try to
Yeah,
bury it and try to hide and hope that no one notices.
yeah, no, but you've actually hit on the number one goal, right? Which is to make yourself a less attractive target. And because if and I'm talking here about criminals, right? The criminal bad actors, because if we're talking about a state-sponsored attack, there's nothing that you can do to stop it. Like literally, if North Korea wants to get into Misty's hard drive, they'll do it. You're not going to stop it. Now you could take some comfort in the fact that they're not going to try, because you and I are not we're not Microsoft, so we don't have to worry about that kind of threat. But the criminals are going after targets of opportunity. And those targets of opportunity are basically, who can I get into, right? What account can I access? So it's not about, generally speaking, it's not about them targeting a specific person. And this is why phishing works, right? They're not targeting a specific person with a phishing attack. They're just sending out the same email to a million different people. One person clicks on it, now they're the target, right? So once that happens, you're already behind the eight ball, but there's an awful lot that you can do to prepare for it in advance. As a company, you have to first and foremost understand what the data is that you have, why you have it. You need to make an effort to not collect more data than you really need to do your job. If there is extra data, get rid of it, destroy it. Um, Documents that you don't need or data that you don't need anymore, you should destroy those, right? There's an awful lot of law firms have been in the news quite a bit in the last couple of years because they've been targeted, and they're targeted because they're a one-stop shop, right? They've got sensitive information for a lot of different clients. So if a bad guy targets a law firm, they can, rest assured they're going to get a lot of really juicy information from a lot of different clients. So they target the law firms. But what the law firms have been not doing very well is destroying documents that are old. So, if they've got a 10-year document destruction policy, anything older than 10 years after a case closes, they need to get rid of that information. A lot of times what we're seeing is that the data that's compromised is 15, 20, 25 years old. There's absolutely no reason for the firm or a company to hold on to that information. So you got to understand your regulatory requirements, obviously, but if you don't have to have something, you shouldn't have it. And the step number one is just only keep what you need to do your job.
Yeah, that's important because I think a lot of us think, well, what if I need it again? It'll be more convenient to have it, then I don't have to go bother anybody. I'd rather be bothered. I'd rather have somebody be like, I don't have your social security. Like, I don't keep any of that information. I don't have it. Go straight to the custodian. Like, I never see it. I don't want it.
Yeah.
And like, I don't think it's that bad to just have to reach back out. Again, it's that friction. It's that thing we're trying to avoid that really, and a lot of us have been, like to hold on to the paper, like to hold on because they're afraid of getting rid of anything important, but usually we can reproduce it or get it again. And yeah, and just making sure you get rid of it properly, right? We're not throwing things in the dumpster.
Yeah, no, and that's,
Again, opportunity, low hanging fruit. There you go. Like, run.
exactly. It really doesn't take much. Your account statements have all sorts of information on it that, you certainly wouldn't just put a picture of it up on your social media account, right? Like there's sensitive stuff there. But it's not too much different from just, crumpling it up and throwing it in the trash. There are, believe it or not, people that go through your trash and that will see, sensitive stuff. So, open up your account statements, look through them, set them aside, and then, once a week, once a month, just throw them in the shredder. Absolutely destroy those things instead of tossing it right in the trash, because it is not it's not unheard of. It's actually not uncommon for people to dumpster dive and find financial records, and then they've got access to all sorts of stuff. But so you know if we're circling back to kind of enterprise risk and companies and what they can do, one of the biggest things that I think companies need to do is prepare in advance. And it really is about thinking through, geez, if this happens, what am I going to do? How do we handle it? Right. And that's why I've started my consulting firm is called Left of Boom Consulting. And that is really, in the life cycle of an incident, there's the boom, which is the incident itself and the bad thing that happens. To the right of boom is the things that always make the news, right? Those are the company's response, the mitigation, the communications with customers. That all happens right of boom on the timeline. But left of boom is the preparation. That's the stuff that nobody ever sees, but that's the stuff that mitigates the boom and impacts how well you handle everything to the right of boom. So left of boom is really preparing and thinking through, if this happens, what am I going to do? You need policies in place, depending on how big you are, that will determine, how many policies and what sorts of contingencies you need to memorialize. But but you need policies in place to say, all right, if this happens, I'm going to contact this vendor to help me. I've got this IT vendor. This is my go-to response for this. I've got a contact at law enforcement that I'm going to immediately go to. And the reason why you have to think all those things through in advance is because the worst possible time to try to figure out who's going to help you with a problem is when you're in the middle of the problem, right? If my water heater explodes, I don't want to have to try to figure out who my plumber is now, right? I want to have that person's number on my phone already so I can call them right up. And it's the same principle.
And I think that's been helpful. I have had some people who have been hacked, and it's really scary, but the ones that have like somebody they know that they're going to reach out to, whether it's a computer person or something like that, that they have kind of already, that's really helpful to figure out like, okay, what do I do next? Because it's often like embarrassing and scary. And I think that a lot of people don't, to know like, okay, well, this will happen. It is not like I'm just going to call this person. Well, a lot of times, sometimes people will call me if they say, okay, this happened with my finances. I'm like, at least they know to call me because I'm not panicking.
Right.
It's not my experience. Like, so they're going through it, but just to even know that, like, okay, but then, all right, we need to call law enforcement. And I think a lot of people, maybe around the holidays, you're talking to your family members, and maybe you might be thinking about, they might be targeted. They might be telling you things that, kind of set off some, alarm bells in your head. So I think that's a really, really important thing to think about. It's just kind of like what the plan is, just the way you have like a fire escape plan with your
Right.
kids, all those things, because you don't want to try to figure it out when it's happening. Why my kids do fire drill and all those things. It's very important. So I think that's definitely a good tip. And also, before we go, just want to, we talked about, making yourself like a less attractive target. What are some of the other things? I know there's a lot of things that technology is building with AI that are really cool and useful and might save us time, AI note taking, all of these things. What are some things that we should ask the vendors that we want to work with before we decide to work with them regarding like their policies? What are some basic things that we should know or ask for before we, have another account with another sign in somewhere else?
Right. Yeah, no, and some of the kind of real basic things that you can ask your vendors, what is the vendor's incident response process, right? So that's key because you want to know if the vendor's involved in an incident, what can you as the customer expect from them? And it allows you to tailor your expectations so that you're not going in thinking, well, the vendor's going to handle all of this, but the vendor doesn't think they're going to, right? So you really need to understand what the roles are and the relationships between the parties in advance. Another key thing is who's actually going to be doing what, right? And it doesn't have to be a super complicated map of responsibilities, but you do have to understand, as the customer, I'm going to do X and I'm going to pay for Y, right? And the vendor is going to do A and pay for B. And setting out those responsibilities is really critical because once an incident happens, once the house is on fire, you don't want to have to try to figure out with the vendor who's responsible for what, right? Like that's not the time to try to figure that out. So that's kind of in a nutshell, I think the most critical piece is understanding who's responsible for what activities when when the house starts burning.
No, that's a great point, because yeah, I think often we think, well, they probably do that, right? But it's better to know in advance what's on you, what's on them, then it's clear. And so I think that's important, because I do think, yeah, there is a lot of, there's a lot of there's a lot of things that people are maybe like, wow, this could save me time, this could save me energy, money, but we have to figure out like, okay, what is the trade-off? And what, how are they prepared for this? And a lot of times, most vendors should be able to answer those questions. It's just a matter of, are we asking?
Right. And the trade-off is not always just how much is this going to cost me, right?
Mhm.
It's not just a dollar figure. A lot of times, I mean, you want to talk about the trust that customers put in companies. That's where your reputation is built, right?
Right.
It's that trust. And associating yourself with a vendor that doesn't deserve that trust, that's going to negatively impact your reputation as a company. And so, it's really important to think through in advance what is going to happen, what could happen. And it doesn't have to be a high percentage issue. Ransomware's hitting all sorts of different companies all up and down the food chain. You don't have to think that, well, there's a 90% chance it's going to hit me, so I really need to worry about it. Even if it's a 2% chance, the impact is going to be really disproportionate. And so even with that 2% chance, you don't want to risk a 2% chance of a catastrophe. So you got to pay attention to it.
Thank you so much, Josh, for joining me today. This has been really helpful. How can people find you? I know, where's the best place to find you if they want to learn more, follow you, kind of stay up to date on these topics, and maybe grab some extra tips from you?
Yeah, I mean, the best way right now is through LinkedIn. So I'm Joshua Cook at LinkedIn, and you can find me through Left of Boom Consulting. That's also on LinkedIn. But no matter how you find me, send me a note, send me a question. I'm happy to engage. I'm happy to tell you, what I think. And I really am an evangelist for preparedness, and that's really what it boils down to when it comes to cybersecurity and privacy: is get ready, and then you can, when it happens, you can take that breath, you can slow it down, you don't have to panic, and you have an idea of what you should do next. That is really critical, and that helps people, whether it's an individual or a corporation, just slowing down and recognizing that it's not going to be the end of the world. You will survive this. You can get through it. You just got to handle it properly. That's all.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Josh. And yes, everybody out there listening, I'm a big fan of planning ahead. Obviously, planning is what I do. I understand that sometimes it's hard to think about these situations, but the more we can anticipate them, the better prepared we'll be when they happen. Or even if they don't, hey, that's fine. Good for us. So if you're looking to come up with a plan for yourself, please head over to mistylynch.com. I'd love to talk to you and see how we can help you get started for the new year. And thank you again, Josh, for joining. Follow him on LinkedIn. He is sharing tips. He is sending out videos. He's giving us information. And I think all of us can have a lot to learn, because this is a very, this landscape is changing. And it's really important to kind of understand that this is not just going to be a Nigerian prince email. It is going to be different, and we have to be well prepared. So thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk again next week.